Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about a $2 trillion decision. Seriously, it's the story of how a small country turned into a global financial giant, and it's basically a masterclass for any investor out there. All right, let's start with a little thought experiment. Just imagine your country, practically overnight, stumbles upon a resource so valuable it could change everything. Well, that's not a hypothetical. That's exactly what happened to a small Scandinavian nation about 50 years ago, and they had to figure out what to do next. So picture this. It's the 1960s, and Norway, well, they hit the jackpot. They found these massive oil reserves just off their coast in the North Sea. This was a gigantic windfall, but it also presented what economists call the resource curse, this weird paradox where sudden huge wealth can actually end up wrecking your economy. So right away, they're faced with this huge nation-defining choice, a decision that was going to affect generations to come. And there were two very obvious but wildly different paths they could take. Okay, so path number one was the easy one. Just spend it. Pour all that cash into public projects, slash taxes, and let the good times roll right now. The other path was the super cautious one. Just save it. Stick it all in a vault, basically, and save it for a rainy day. But, and this is where the story gets really, really smart, Norway didn't pick door number one or door number two. They looked at the short-term party and the boring old savings account and thought, nope, we can do better. They found a third way, a far more powerful and forward-thinking option. Instead of just letting their wealth sit there, they decided to make it work. They set out to build a perpetual financial engine. The idea was to create the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. And the goal, while it sounds complicated, was actually profound in its simplicity: turn a finite resource, oil, into a permanent, diversified global portfolio of financial assets. So how'd they do it? What was the secret sauce behind this financial engine? Well, the genius here wasn't some crazy complex algorithm. It was actually a set of incredibly simple, totally ironclad rules that would guide every single decision they made. Okay, let's really dig into this blueprint because its power is truly in its simplicity. First up, the inflow rule. Every single cent from oil went straight into the fund. No detours. This kept it away from politicians who might be tempted to spend it. Second, the investment rule. That money was immediately put to work, invested all over the world in stocks, bonds, real estate, a huge diversified portfolio designed for long-term growth. And third, and this is the absolute masterstroke, the withdrawal rule. The government could only spend up to 3% of the fund's value each year. Think about that. They forced themselves to live off the interest, never touching the original capital. So what's the result? What happens when you stick to a simple plan like this with just unwavering discipline? Not for a year, not for 5 years, but for decades. Well, the results are, honestly, they're hard to wrap your head around. As of today, that fund is worth over $2 trillion. That's a 2 with 12 zeros after it. It is the single largest investment fund on the entire planet. But here's the kicker. That unbelievable number belongs to a country of just 5.5 million people. It's a tiny population for that amount of wealth. I mean, when you do the math, it is just mind-blowing. It breaks down to about $360,000 for every single man, woman, and child in the country. In their own currency, that means every Norwegian is a millionaire, just because of this national investment strategy. It's incredible. And this slide really shows you what that transformation looks like. The fund churns out an average of 6% a year after inflation. It's one of the biggest, most influential investors in the world. It owns huge stakes in companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia. But the real takeaway here? Norway successfully switched from being an oil economy to an ownership economy. They now depend more on the returns from their investments than on the oil that started the whole thing. So, okay, when you strip it all away, what's the big lesson here? For you, for me, for any company or country trying to build wealth, it really all boils down to one powerful psychological and financial idea. Deferred gratification. It's a fancy term for something simple. Resisting the temptation to get a small reward now so you can get a much, much bigger reward later. It's the absolute foundation of all successful long-term investing. This whole story just perfectly shows the difference between two ways of thinking. The spending mindset sees a windfall like a bonus and thinks, great, new TV. The compounding mindset sees that same bonus and thinks, okay, this is a seed. If I plant it and I'm patient, it can grow into a forest. And that really makes you think, right? It forces you to ask yourself a pretty deep question about your own money. How do you make that critical shift from just thinking about your income, the money you earn, to building your capital, the assets that can earn money for you even when you're sleeping? So let's leave it with this question for you to think about. We're probably not going to discover oil in our backyard, right? But we all have some kind of oil revenue in our lives. It might be your salary, a bonus, a side hustle. The question Norway's story makes us ask is, are we just spending it or are we compounding it?